Okay, I think we're going to get started. I hope everybody's here. I didn't turn the lights off too soon. I don't have a person turning the lights off and on. So if we can all stand this romantic lighting, we're going to have this lighting for this whole portion of the program. So good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Stecker. I'm the horticulture technician and the Master Gardener Program Coordinator for Alamance County Cooperative Extension, and that's where you are right now, in case you were wondering. We're going to talk about the herb garden or herb garden, depending on where you live and if you watch Martha Stewart. So, and let's just go ahead and get started. And we're going to have a little demonstration. We're going to have a little drawing, and we've got some snacks. Okay, is it herb or herb? What is it? In the United States, it's generally herb, unless you're saying herbaceous. In the UK, they favor the H. So there you go. That's all I know about that. Okay, what is an herb? Botanists say it's a small seed-bearing plant with fleshy rather than woody parts. Herbaceous. Trees, shrubs, annuals, vines, more primitive plants such as ferns, mosses, algae, lichens, and fungi, valued for their flavor, fragrance, medicinal and healthful qualities, economic and industrial uses, pesticidal properties, and coloring materials or dyes. And that's from the Herb Society of America, New Encyclopedia of Herbs and Their Uses. So, it's pretty much every plant. But we're going to talk about the things that are most traditionally in our gardens called herbs, the things that we would use for cooking or for flavor or for scents or teas or whatever. So, in medieval Europe, 6th century to 16th century AD, virtually all plants were assumed to have some medicinal value. Okay. Nobility as well as monasteries were the major landowners. Peasants worked the land and provided the food and taxes, and peasants each had a strip of land which they could use to grow food for the family as well as a kitchen garden at their house. All women were expected to be able to brew remedies in their still room. So there you go. The earliest visual representation of a formal garden to survive the Middle Ages dates from the 9th century. It's called the St. Gall Plan from 890 AD, and it was a master plan for the ideal Benedictine monastery. So that's not very easy to read, but we're going to look at this section, which is the St. Gall Plan, which includes a large kitchen garden, a smaller garden with 16 beds of medicinal herbs located next to the doctor's house and near the infirmary. That's where the medicine was made. And that's an interpretation of basically a redrawing of what you just looked at, a little bit easier to see. This is the St. Gall Plan. You can see here, there's where's my pointer? There we go. There's the garden, and there's the cemetery. That's for the gardeners. The gardeners are here. So no, this is the physic garden, which would be for the doctors, and this is the doctor's chamber. So this is where your medicinal herbs were grown. It includes a large kitchen garden, smaller garden with 16 beds of medicinal herbs, and here's an illustration from the time. Next to the doctor's house and near the infirmary. For the sickly, take this wort rosemary, pound it with oil, smear the sickly one, wonderfully thou healest him, from a Saxon herbal. So there you go. You must have rosemary. Not all medieval gardens were purely utilitarian. In the 13th century, in his Book of Secrets, Albertus Magnus recommended the layout for an herber, a place of beauty refreshment rather than a home for useful plants. He directed that the lawn at the center of the garden be surrounded by borders of sweet-smelling herbs such as rue, basil, and sage. They didn't have the tomatoes over there yet, so the basils were just for scent. They weren't making sauce yet. Wasn't until the Renaissance that medicine, botany, and horticulture began to diverge. This is a painting by Peter the Elder Bruegel from 1625. Created as teaching gardens by university faculties of medicine, the burgeoning botanical gardens of the Renaissance continued to favor the narrow rectangular beds of the medieval type. So this is Hortus Botanicus, Leiden, 1705. Chelsea's Physic Garden in London, founded by the London Society of Apothecaries in the 17th century. The beds still in use today are in the medieval style. And this is actually those gardens now. Pretty cool. This is the Chelsea Physic Garden. During the Renaissance, garden makers began to organize plants into more complex patterns. The knot, with its decorative interlacing bands of clipped herbs, became a feature of the pleasure garden. And here's some patterns. You might want to, you can probably, I'll be happy to give you a copy of this if you need this for your garden. See me after. A geometric design within a square, rectangular circle was drawn on the ground, and each figure in the pattern was planted out with a single herb closely clipped to maintain the design. And look. Elizabethan gardens used lavender, germander, santolina, hyssop, and thyme to lay out their knots. Boxwood became the plant of choice by the 17th century. Not too many uses for boxwood. Doesn't even smell that good. But it does maintain a nice little clipped shape, so that's why they decided to use that. High Renaissance gardens became more about design than about herbs. There's a little weeding going on in here, a little maintenance. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, in 1753, Moravian missionaries traveled from Pennsylvania to North Carolina and established Bethabara, Hebrew for House of Passage, as a temporary settlement on the new frontier while they laid plans for a more permanent central town, which would become known as Salem. Oldest well-documented medical herb garden in the United States was originally planted in 1753 by Brother Hans Martin Kalberlan next to the apothecary at Bethabara. Below is the map of the garden drawn by Brother Christian Gottlieb Reuter in June 1761. So this was the original plan at Bethabara, which is just over next to Winston-Salem. Yeah, well, it's in Winston-Salem, technically. So this was the foundation of the apothecary in 1763. Modern interpretation of the 1761 map used to reconstruct the garden, and this is what the garden looks like now. This picture was taken last year when we visited there. You can actually go and tour this garden if you want to see this, and they have the only known well-documented colonial community garden and the earliest known well-documented colonial medical garden in the United States, which is right an hour away over in Winston-Salem.
That's in Winston-Salem?
Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool. Well, it's historic Bethabara, which is in Winston-Salem. Medicine was practiced by very, very differently then. Most physicians learned by apprenticeship and few were formally trained. Plants from the medical garden were collected by the physician and compounded into medicines using traditional recipes. The physician or apothecary would dispense these medicines along with careful instruction on their use. This picture is taken at Old Salem. All right, modern herb garden design. Anything goes. It's true, and just as long as you can give the plants what they want, it doesn't matter what the shape of the garden is. So there's a there's a sturdy-looking garden. You can do it in a wagon wheel. Most herbs do not take a whole lot of space. And I actually just read something today about the recommendation was to start with a garden that's no larger than 3 feet by 3 feet if you're going to do a dedicated herb garden, and you should be able to put as whatever you can use in there. There's a little one on a deck. There's a series of boxes stacked. Okay, so that's a little fancier and a little bigger. Next to the patio. There's the medieval style again. And you can do it little, see how little you can do a garden. I think you can do better than that. I like this one on a wall. Pretty fancy. You can make a pallet garden. All you need to do is line this with landscape fabric, and you can plant your herbs up and down. You generally need to have a drip irrigation system installed so you can keep them watered. And there's a wall. There's a vertical garden. And you can see that this is where the pots go, that they stick the pots into the wall here. How about some mailboxes? A mailbox garden. One thing you make sure, you can easily do this, but make sure there's drainage in these pots, because as we'll see, most of our most popular herbs that we use for cooking are from the Mediterranean region, and they like sharp drainage. This is the herb garden at the Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. This picture was taken 2 weeks ago, so it's there. And here's a little herb garden we had out front. I just replanted some of the thyme in there. The thyme, which makes a great container plant, overwintered, a lot of the, especially if we have a really hard cold winter, which we did this year, a lot of the top growth will die back, and so you need to actually prune it down, and it should come back. There's our herb garden right outside the door here. And a pot in the garden. Okay, let's talk about planting the herbs. Many of your favorite herbs are native to the Mediterranean region. They need good drainage, bright light, and a neutral pH. Our soils here tend to be acidic. Most of the herbs are tolerant of the pH we have here, but if you add a little lime, they'll be a little bit happier. Soil test can't ever hurt anything by having a soil test done. Oh, look who's there. Compost, till in compost or pine fines to improve the drainage and create airspace in heavy soils. Most of our soils are heavy clay, so the more air you can incorporate in there, and you can make airspace by adding pine fines or compost. You can even add pea gravel to improve airspace in there. Add lime according to the soil test. Planting groups according to plant light and water requirements. Consider the plant's ultimate size and leave space accordingly. So you see this nice little lemongrass we put here? Yeah, well, think twice about lemongrass, for example. All right, the perennial Mediterraneans. We're going to talk about some of these great plants. And these aren't just for flavoring your... I like mushrooms and thyme and chicken with thyme very much, but it's also pretty to look at. So, great drainage and plenty of sun. That's what they need. Those are the Mediterraneans. Thyme, rosemary, lavender, sage, tarragon, oregano, marjoram, winter savory, santolina, and hyssop or agastache. Thyme, perfect for containers, many different colors and leaf forms, and then when they bloom, you get a flash of real pretty flowers in about this time. Rosemary, a little more tolerant of clay soils than the other Mediterraneans. They do not like to be transplanted once they've been established, and some varieties are less hardy. The most hardy variety is Salem, and Salem variety was actually discovered at Old Salem on a lot that was growing there, and all of the Salem plants have been propagated from that plant. So if you can find this is Salem here. If you can find that, you're going to have a more reliably hardy plant. However, you can see it's quite vigorous. It gets pretty big. We've had some winter damage, even a little bit on this one, but on some of our other rosemary plants, we had some winter damage this year. And you can just prune that out, and they should come back, unless they're dead all the way to the ground. And then you can get a new one at the Herb Festival next week. Lavender. It prefers perfect drainage. And this one, more than others, if you have trouble growing lavender, it's probably because it has wet feet in the winter and it just can't deal with that. So give it better drainage. This is our scree garden. We have 3 big clumps of lavender and they are doing great. So this is a mixture. This is actually mulched with pea gravel, but the soil is mixed with pea gravel, compost, and the existing soil. So there's probably only about half of it is the existing clay soil. It's a pollinator magnet too. This thing was buzzing last year. Sage, again, another one, won't tolerate cold, wet feet. If your sage died last winter, it's because it had cold, wet feet. So, and that's another one that you might need to replant. And it's available in several colors and leaf forms. This is a traditional culinary sage, has kind of fuzzy leaves. The nice thing about most of these herbs is their pungent taste is not appealing to wildlife to eat, so they're pretty safe from deer and rabbits.
When you say it gets cold, wet feet, you say it doesn't drain?
Right, in the winter especially. If it's more because when they're vigorously growing in the summer, they can use more water. So if there's a lot of rain in the summer, it's not, or in the spring, it's more able to use that water rather than just sit there and rot, which is what happens when it gets cold, wet feet in the winter. So if you can somehow, in a pot would actually do better too, because it could drain out even in the winter. But again, the pot issue is there's less insulation against the freeze, and you really don't want to freeze the roots. So if it's in a small, tight pot, it could actually freeze the roots, and that would kill the plant altogether. So it's a fine line. Oregano is a member of the mint family, and if you know anything about mint, that means it can be somewhat invasive. So that's a good candidate for a container. And it's not as picky about soil, which is also means, yes, it can be somewhat invasive. So it grows very well in a container. Winter savory, that's a really pretty little evergreen, well-behaved, low-growing ground cover herb. I think it gets kind of ignored because it's not so tricky to grow and people don't grow it so much. So, yes.
Is there more than one kind of savory?
There's summer savory, which is an annual. So winter savory, this is a perennial evergreen. Russian or French tarragon likes it sunny and dry, not a fan of our humid summers. Be sure drainage is perfect and there's plenty of air circulation around the plant. I was surprised to see that ours came back this year in our herb garden. As a matter of fact, I checked the tag, which was still in it, to see, is that the French tarragon? Yeah, it is. So that's great. Santolina, perfect in pots and rock gardens. The gray foliage is an excellent foil for green herbs. It makes a beautiful clump. As a matter of fact, that one we moved, it was in a pot and doing very well, but when we put in the scree garden, we needed some plants for there. So we took it out of the pot and put it in the scree garden, and it's doing very well. It likes it very much there. And it gets those neat yellow flowers too in the summer. This is also a member of the mint family, but it's not aggressively invasive, so it's a good one. Sometimes it self-sows a little bit, but that's just more plants. So
It comes in different colors, right?
yes, we have an orange one in the garden. It's not as vigorous as this blue variety.
The hyssop, there's more than one type of that, is that correct?
Well,
Or is it just one of that?
well, the agastache hyssop is a common name, so it could include something else. So
Thank you.
that's why we like to go with the Latin names, just because then you know everybody knows we're on the same page. It's like buttercups. What's a buttercup? So is it ranunculus or is it jonquil? So we like to go with the Latin names or the botanical names. All right, annuals. Basil, dill, fennel, cilantro, lemon verbena, which is actually a tender perennial. Parsley. Okay, parsley's a biennial. I know you're all going, but I knew that. But we'll talk about that in a second. Basil, drainage is important, but don't forget to water it. So I never plant my basil with the other herbs, except here we do. It does fine, but I like to plant it with my tomatoes to give them the idea before they become food. So keep the flowers pinched to encourage leaf production until frost. Dill shoots up, blooms, and it's done. Make successive plantings of this fast-growing tall annual. Yeah, you can use the flower heads. You can make your pickles. Fennel, good drainage is important, but keep well watered. Have any of you ever grown a fennel bulb? I don't think that's going to happen here. Have you?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, what'd you do?
It was in the crack of my sidewalk. I can't take credit for it.
Well, it was probably the extra lime from the concrete in your sidewalk. So maybe it needs the soil a little bit sweet. But be careful with fennel. If you're going to use the seeds from fennel, don't plant it near your dill because the seeds will taste, because they're closely related and they can actually cross-pollinate. You won't notice it in the plant. The flavor of the plant will be the same, but the seeds fennel seeds and dill seeds look very much alike, and they'll end up tasting like each other. So if you ever get fennel to grow to the point where it makes seeds. Cilantro. Okay. Don't worry if it bolts. It's going to bolt because as soon as it gets warm, it bolts because the seeds are coriander. So you can just harvest the seeds then, and then you have coriander. See if you can plant it in a pot. Move it into the shaded area when it starts getting super warm, and you might be able to have it last a little bit longer. It's a little fragile for our hot temperatures here. Lemon verbena, plant in full sun and well-drained soil, may be grown in containers and moved to a sheltered area for winter. If we have a mild winter, it might come back. It sometimes comes back. So it's a tender perennial. Parsley can take some shade. This biennial should be planted every year, as the second year is all about the flower stalk and the flavor becomes stronger and a little bitter. So, there are two kinds that are common around here. This is the curly parsley, and this is the flat-leafed or Italian parsley. Word is that the flavor is better or more intense on the flat-leaf Italian parsley, but these guys don't really care. They'll eat either one. So, this is the larvae of the black swallowtail, so very much a parsley eater. So plant enough for them. Yeah, it comes back. Some oddball favorites: lemongrass, cardoon, chives, bay laurel, and garlic. Okay, here's the lemongrass, and cool, right? It's a really neat plant, but it's kind of like pampas grass, only it dies down in the winter or dies in the winter, and then you got this stump, a pill to dig up. So here's my advice: get your neighbor to plant one, harvest some stalks from theirs, and then you can store them in the freezer. It freezes really well. And how much lemongrass do you really need? I don't think anybody needs this much.
What do you do with that huge brown stump?
Dig it up, compost it well.
If you leave it, will it regrow?
Not, I've heard people say that it comes back, but I've never had one come back. So, yeah, it's kind of a big thing. Cardoon. All right, this is actually the edible part of this is the stem. And it's a very popular vegetable in Italy, for example. But you have to, it's kind of, you can see that it's more fun to grow for these beautiful flowers. It's related to the artichoke, and it looks cool in your perennial border, and isn't this neat? But if you really want to eat it, the stem, you take the stem part, you peel the stem because it has a lot of woody exterior, and then you can prepare it like you would asparagus or any other vegetable like that, if you're so ambitious. But I'd rather have it make flowers. Chives, great in containers, and the edible flowers are lovely in salads. So we'll have our little snack later on if that cheese comes to room temperature, and and there's some chive flowers on top.
And you can eat the flowers as well?
Absolutely, the flowers they taste just like chives. How about that? Bay laurel. Okay. It always kills me because my sisters live in California, and they took me one time to see a bay laurel tree, which would not fit in this room. Width-wise, the trunk was this big around. And I'm thinking, if you go to the store and you buy a jar, how much is a jar of bay leaves? It's like $7 or something. That kind of breaks my heart. So you can get a whole bay laurel plant, put it in a pot on your patio, and you can either bring it in. I've had mine over winter, even in a pot, if the pot's big enough. It didn't make it this last winter. So I'll be going to the herb festival next week and getting a new one.
Mine is about that tall now.
Good. Did it make it through the winter, or did you bring it in?
I brought it in.
Ah. She brought it in. Forever.
Do you top it so that it doesn't continue to grow height-wise?
No, well, the thing about growing this in a pot is the pot actually constricts the size of the plant. It's kind of like bonsai. So you will never have that grow outside the pot and overtake your landscape. But you'll get as many bay leaves as you could ever possibly use to make as many stews as you could ever want. Put some in your spaghetti sauce or whatever. You could never use all the bay leaves that you can grow yourself. And then you can laugh at that $7 bottle at the grocery store.
How old is that tree?
This one I don't know. This is a picture. I should have brought a picture of mine, but mine's dead right now. So. But when you think about it, you buy the plant at the herb festival, and I'm not sure how much they are now, but the plants are what, $5, something like that. But anyway, so you take it home, and you're already ahead by $2 over the jar because you got that many leaves on the plant. So. Okay, garlic. This is one of the best things. I think everybody should grow garlic just because it's fun. So garlic is you plant the cloves in early November, you harvest it in early June, and then you have garlic all year long, more than you can use. We learned how to braid garlic here. This is actually from the garden here. And there's a garlic clove in one of those dips from my garden from last June, so it keeps that long. So very easy to plant. You just plant it in regular garden soil. You do have to dedicate the space because it's going to be growing from from November until June. So
Can you use the cloves you buy at the grocery store?
I wouldn't. I would get some pass-along cloves, or you could actually buy. It's not been treated. I'm not sure what they do to they treat some of the garlic so that it won't sprout. So.
That's what we use the ones we wait, the ones that are sprouting in our garlic jar.
Yeah.
Using those, we just plant them. It works.
From grocery store garlic.
If it sprouts.
Yeah, well, that's true. If it sprouts, if your grocery store garlic starts sprouting, go ahead and give it a try. But there's different kinds. There's soft neck and there's elephant, which is actually a different species, I think. And there's actually some garlic farms around here. We visited one not too long ago. Well, you have to let it cure, and braid it and let it cure for a little while, about 30 days in a warm, dry place. And then you can just store it at room temperature. It does fine. All right, the invasives. Let's talk a little bit about some herbs you might want to reconsider. Plant these herbs in containers or in their own walled garden beds. And you can make your own little walled garden bed by taking the bottom out of a large container, plant the whole pot in the ground, and put the herb in the pot, and that will make sure the top edge is high so it doesn't leap over immediately. However, it probably will anyway. Even this step may not be enough to keep these wannabe garden thugs in their place. Lemon balm. It's so pretty and it smells so good. Sweet Melissa, that's its common name. This isn't what the Allman Brothers had in mind. Mint. Only on Derby Day will you ever need this much mint. And that's only if you're having a really big party.
There's two different, you've got peppermint and you've got
Different types of mint.
Yeah, there's peppermint, spearmint, chocolate mint. There's all kinds of mints. Just be careful.
How do you tell them apart?
By the smell, I guess. Yeah.
But if you look at that,
Oh,
Spearmint has white in the leaf. Anyway, mine did.
Don't forget mojito.
You bruise the leaf and smell.
no mojitos? Oh, that's right, Cinco de Mayo. You can have a mojito. Right.
Cuban.
Okay, it's Cuban.
but which mint do you use?
Who cares?
Who cares, right?
Yeah, you can have them all. You can have them every day.
You don't eat it.
Which mint do you use on Derby Day?
I prefer spearmint on Derby Day. Horseradish. You remember that horseradish plant I got from you? It's still in the pot because I'm scared to plant it. It's doing very well, though. Horseradish, even a tiny piece of root left behind will make a healthy new plant next spring. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. And may I suggest? Yeah, that's the way to go. I should have brought that.
Really pretty.
No, it's not real pretty. I'm not sure this plant is that pretty either. But this is what the horseradish. And sometimes they have it for sale at the store if you want to make your own horseradish. Okay, here's some different sages. Sages, the salvias are a really big family, and there are the the culinary sages, and then there are the ornamental sages, and they all have the same kind of flowers. It's like a lipped flower, and they all have a scent to them that's less minty and more sagey. Okay, there's some resources here. The Herb Society of America, the North Carolina Herb Association, Southern Herb Growing, and the Eyewitness Handbook Herbs. Visual. Okay, the Herb Festival. The Women's Resource Center Herb Festival is next Friday and Saturday from all day long, and the master gardeners will be there. So, and in addition to herbs, there's lots of perennials. So, it's a good time. Is this the 20th year? Or? It's at First Presbyterian Church on Davis Street. So we'll see you there if you come. All right. So now, let's see. Let's turn the lights on. I'm off screen now. I'm going to demonstrate planting an herb garden. All right, so you can put an herb garden in just about anything. And I thought this was perfect for a windowsill garden. Now, I found this on the ground next to my mailbox. And according to this, it's a 12-inch mud pan for sheetrock. It looks like it's been used, but Mark tells me that that's now inert and will not melt. So I had my husband drill some holes because he has the tools. We're going to put a little bit of screen in here. That's just to keep the soil inside the container. And let me put my gloves on because I'm a delicate flower. Well, there's my black glasses. Yes, this is just, you can buy this on a roll. And this is just plastic window screening. It's also a good idea to put this in your houseplants that you put outside to keep critters from entering through the drainage holes. And most of them will then be outside instead of in your kitchen or your living room when you bring the plants in, or your sunroom. So I've got this is just regular potting soil. There's actually no soil in it. It's pine bark fines for forest materials, they say, and a little perlite, and that's pretty much all that's in there. It's better to have it be moist, but I didn't want to carry a big thing of water around. So I'm just going to put a little bit in there, and then I'm going to plant some herbs in here. Now, keep in mind that if you're planting an herb garden on your windowsill, these plants may not all be getting along too well. But I've got some lavender. I think that's inappropriate for in there, but it would smell good. Let's put that in there. Thyme for sure. If you're going to use it for cooking, we can put a parsley in there. And maybe it's better to put, let's put the basil in there instead of that. Okay, so here's your little cooking garden. When you plant them, it's pretty easy just pinch the pot a little bit, put your fingers over it so you catch it, and you can see this is a nice well-grown plant. I'm going to break up the roots just a little bit. It doesn't require a lot of breaking up because it's been well-grown. I'm going to put that one in the middle. What I'm going to do with this one is pinch it back. And literally, that's what I'm going to do. You can use the scissors. I'm going to use my fingernail. Hopefully that'll work. Don't worry, you haven't hurt anything. This is perfectly usable, delicious basil, so you can start your pesto with that.
If you wanted to re-root it, how would you do that?
Actually, if you stick this in water, it might root in the water. You can do that. You could also stick it in soil and keep it watered. I'm going to break this up. Now, parsley has a pretty vigorous taproot, so I don't know how long it will last in your window garden here, but it's good while it lasts. Now, when you put the plants in, keep a little bit of airspace over the top of the soil so when you water it, the water doesn't spill over the sides. And thyme. Just going to break it up a little bit. This has a pretty big root ball. Now, I didn't come up with the perfect size tray to put under this perfect size planter here. but you will need something to keep the water. Don't let it stand in water, though. Again, these plants, this soil, you're way ahead of the game because it will. Oop, somebody's phone is ringing loudly. Okay. There's an herb garden. Easy peasy. Now, whoever wins this in our raffle, I don't know how to take that off. So you put. Anyway, I think it's kind of cool. Looks a little bit like remember the wall hanging garden with the stainless steel? Just like that. Just like that. Okay, so let's now do a little drawing. And this is one of the prizes, the grand prize. And, oh my goodness. Nope, you can't come. He's not included. What? No, it's a tree frog. Hello, sweetie. I'm going to put you back outside. You can't have him. You want him. Okay. Could you give them tickets? They're up there on the table. And then, if you wouldn't mind, Carol, if you would bring me the basket, and we'll do the drawing. And then I've got all these thyme plants. All right. Do you want to draw? All right. Here we go. Well, if you're going to make me read it. 696912. Congrats. And this is for we're going to do the thyme plants first. All right. Come again. Sure. And look, I guess I better hurry this along. 696944. You never won anything. Yay. And even, you know what? Even if you already have time, you can never have too much time. I'm going to just skip to the last part, 945. Oh, well, wow. Yeah. Yeah. I think they're all the same. Time. That's time. Mm-hmm. 9. Let's notice I have a little schmutz. 915. 915. There you go. All right. 933. 933. All right. Okay. Hey, just grab one.
Cool.
Okay. Next, I better stir these up. Okay. 932. I thought it was. All right. Sure. 940. I'm going to take just the time. All right, this one's for I'll let you pick between the sage and the lavender. Okay. 919.
Oh, that's me.
Oh. Sage or lavender?
I think I'm going to try the lavender.
Good luck.
Yeah, I think I'll try it.
Okay. 910. Katie. Sage for the sage. You're welcome. All right, now for our grand prize. Whoever wins this better water it when you get home. Okay, here we go. 916. All right. And now, if anybody would like to try some of the herb spreads I made, there's two different kinds. They're very similar. They both have chives, and they have chive blossoms on top, totally edible. And the ingredients are listed on the on piece of paper there. So, and there's some crackers. There you go. You're welcome. So if anybody would like to try, help yourself.